The School Board for London was an institution of local government and the first directly elected body covering the whole of London. The Elementary Education Act 1870 was the first to provide for education for the whole population of England and Wales. It created elected school boards, which had power to build and run schools where there were insufficient voluntary school places. They could also compel attendance. In most places, the school boards were based on borough districts or civil parishes, but in London the board covered the whole area of the Metropolitan Board of Works, the area today known as Inner London. Between 1870 and 1904, the LSB was the single largest educational provider in London, and the infrastructure and policies it developed were an important influence on London schooling long after the body was abolished. School board members. The entire board was elected every 3 years, with the first elections held in November 1870. The LSB originally consisted of 49 members elected from 10 divisions, based around London's constituencies of the districts formed under the Metropolitan Management Act 1855. 4 divisions, representing the City, Southwark, Chelsea and Greenwich, returned 4 members. The divisions of Lambeth, Tower Hamlets, Hackney and Westminster returned 5 members each. Finally, Finsbury and Marylebone returned 6 and 7 members respectively. The membership increased over time, to 50 in 1876 when Lambeth was given an extra member, to 51 in 1882 when the representation of Chelsea increased to 5 members, and to 55 in 1885 when Lambeth was subdivided into 2 smaller divisions, Lambeth East and Lambeth West, with 4 and 6 members respectively. The electoral system of the LSB contained several innovations. Firstly, the board's election of 1870 was polled by secret ballot, being the first large-scale election to use this approach in Britain. Secondly, the cumulative voting system gave electors a number of votes equal to the number of seats in the division in which they were voting. The elector could use up as many of the votes on a single candidate as they wished, which meant that minority interests often found representation. The LSB, at the time of its creation, had one of the broadest mandates of any elected body in Britain. Unusually, women were permitted to vote on the same terms as men for the school boards and also to stand for election. A number of women were elected to the board, including Elizabeth Garrett, who topped the poll at the first board election in 1870. One measure of the LSB's importance can be seen in the number of notable figures who stood for election to the board. The board attracted a number of the leading figures of the day, including the scientist Thomas Huxley, Helen Taylor, stepdaughter of John Stuart Mill, and Lord Lawrence, who served as the LSB's first chairman. The board was also responsible for launching a number of political careers, including those of Charles Reade, Benjamin Waugh, and the Conservative cabinet minister, William Henry Smith. Work of the school board. The original intention of the board was to provide a sufficient number of school places for the poorest children in London, which were originally estimated at little more than 100,000. The policy adopted by the LSB was to provide London with modern, high-quality schools, whilst compelling parents by law to educate the children. Although education would not be compulsory on a national level until 1880, the board passed a by-law in 1871 that compelled parents to have their children schooled between the ages of 5 and 13. The LSB was largely successful in their aims and often struggled to keep up with the demand from the services. For instance, by the end of the 1880s, the board was providing school places for more more than 350,000 children. This growth was frequently attributed to the quality of school premises, which were often far superior to those of private to charity schools. The board was responsible for constructing over 400 schools across London. An important figure in this process was Edward Robert Robson, the board's first chief architect. Robson was responsible for designing many of the school buildings erected by the board. The board's policy was to construct schools which would be attractive, and would serve to improve the general appearance of the districts in which they were constructed. Although school board architecture drew a considerable amount of criticism at the time, the schools were often sturdy and practical structures, and many schools constructed during this period are still in use. Abolition of the board. Although the school boards had been largely successful in increasing the number of children attending school in Britain, they were perceived as bureaucratic and expensive. As a response to this, the boards were abolished by the Education Act of 1902, which replaced them with local education authorities. In London, the London County Council had been created in 1889 to replace the Metropolitan Board of Works, and in 1904 the responsibility for education in London was transferred to the LCC. The LSB held its final meeting on 28 April 1904, with the County Council taking over on 1 May. The LCC itself was abolished in 1965, with education for the former school board area passing to the Inner London Education Authority, a committee of the Greater London Council. The ILEA was abolished in 1990, with the Inner London Borough Councils becoming education authorities.